This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is a Samsung tablet, and much as it might look like an Android tablet, it is so thin, right? It's kind of amazing. This is the new Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S. A lot of names there. Samsung really should stop piling on every brand they've ever used into one product name. And you would think it might be called an ATIV, which is Samsung's PC lineup, because this is a full Windows 10 12-inch tablet. It's that thin, that light. The tablet by itself weighs 1.53 pounds. It is only a quarter of an inch thick. That's like 6.3 millimeters. It's just absolutely crazy. It's absolutely gorgeous. So we look at it now. Well, here's a Windows tablet that piqued everybody's interest when Samsung first showed this off at CES 2016. This is the just available Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S. Despite the Galaxy name, which is usually reserved for Samsung's Android products, this is a full Windows 10 64-bit tablet. Insanely thin, insanely light, very nice high-quality look to it. Not cheesy in the least bit. It's, you know, right up there with the iPad Pro for something that's pretty damn good looking and just exciting. What's really special about this is it has a AMOLED display. That's been the buzzword for 2016. Now, AMOLED displays have been in TVs for quite some time, certainly, and there's been a few monitors, but really in PC applications it's been scarce because there's some issues with it. It's prone to burn-in, and we tend to show a lot of static images on our PC desktops compared to, say, a TV or something like that. And the other problem is that it uses a lot of power, relatively speaking, when it's showing predominantly whites. When it's showing black, it is absolutely using no power, which is pretty cool. It turns the backlights off. But when it shows whites, it's using that power. And when we're using a PC, we tend to have white things up a lot, be it Word or Excel, backgrounds are white, web pages, that sort of thing. Happily, Samsung, who is the company that makes OLED displays, or Super AMOLED as they like to call it, really has it under control here, and they've done a very good job. So the frame around the tablet is all metal. It's extremely rigid. Now, on the back here, you have your choice of black or white. And the black is like Samsung's recent ATIV books. It's kind of a bluish matte black. And as far as I can tell, this is actually plastic, not metal. It never gets cold to the touch, and being, you know, it's still a little chilly out. It should be getting chilly. Anyway, it doesn't look bad. It does look like an ATIV book, which is a high-end ultrabook, so I'm not complaining. And this is also a cool and quiet product because the Intel Core M CPU is fanless, and it tends to get less hot than a Core i5, for example, or a Core i7. So that allows for this slimmer design. But even so, with something this thin, I expected the hot spot on the back to be really hot, and it's not. And the warmest spot is right around here, but not burning hot. And again, no fan, so it is silent. Controls, there are very few, and ports, there are even fewer. This is like the 12-inch MacBook in that respect. We have our volume controls up here and the power button. Now, the power button, they did a good job here. If you press it the normal kind of quick way that you would press it, you actually get a little on-screen battery indicator, not like a charging Samsung Galaxy phone. You actually have to press and hold it to turn it on. And they do that so it doesn't accidentally turn on in your bag. This side button is your Windows Start button. They had no other place to put it. The bezels are pretty small on this for a tablet, so it's on the side there. Stereo speaker grill, there's one of them over here. You got your antenna lines. Again, it reminds me of a Galaxy phone, sort of, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The bottom has the groove to fit the included keyboard connector, and you can see the kind of magnetic pogo pin connectors it uses, not unlike the iPad Pro or the Surface Pro 4. In fact, the included keyboard folio case that it comes with is a lot like the iPad Smart keyboard cover. Now, Samsung has made something similar to this for their smaller Android tablets, but they haven't used this actual connector here. So that means you don't need to worry about Bluetooth with this or charging the keyboard. It gets the power that it needs from the tablet. The bad news, this is not backlit. The other bad news is when you first start typing on this, you're going to say, oh, yeah. And I found that I got used to it, and I did write our 2,300-word written review on this. You do get used to it. It's not so bad, but you do have to pay more attention when you're typing. And then my error rate was pretty similar to any other pretty good keyboard that I've used with a laptop, but like I said, it just takes more care and consideration. Keys don't have too much travel. They do have some sound. Like the Surface Pro type cover, this whole thing resonates a little bit when you type also. This is sort of like the older Surface Pro type cover, in that you have the edge-to-edge keys rather than the island design. And you can see the island design on the latest type cover right here on our Surface Pro 4. Surface Pro 4 I find much better keyboard to use, and it's backlit, so Microsoft certainly scores points there. The trackpad on the Samsung is decent and even supports some gestures, multi-touch, that sort of thing, so you can pinch and zoom and you can use your 2 fingers scrolling, that sort of thing. It's an okay trackpad. It's actually not bad at all. And it's your typical kind of robust, fabric-y, rubberized, treated thing, so it resists dust and all that sort of thing, and dirt. And there are only 2 positions for this, so let's put it in so you can see how it works. So it aligns via the magnets here, and it's pretty darn good, but as you can see, you can kind of have it a little bit misaligned to the side. It's easy enough to get it centered. And then this is magnetic over here as well, so it actually clamps on pretty well, a little cutout for the camera, and then it rests like this. Now I find it pretty stable actually. I haven't had it tip over, so it's actually more stable than the iPad Smart cover in that respect. The bad news is this is the upright position. I find that when I'm using it, I like to have it tilted a little more back. Now the viewing angles on the display are quite good, so it's still legible. It still looks fine, but it just, I would have liked a little bit more lean, but probably it wasn't going to be as stable, and that's why they opted for this position. The other position is if you just drop it like that and slide this down, you can kind of create a little wedge and drop it like so. So if you just want to have it kind of propped up when you're using it on the table, you can do that. And of course, when you're carrying it, you just disconnect it right here from the magnet, which is pretty strong. It immediately turns off the screen when you do that, and you, of course, could turn it back on. It doesn't know when you're doing this, so this is not going to turn it off. But just disconnecting from the keyboard will put it to sleep. So anyway, when you close it, this is remarkable. This is basically a laptop, right? And look how trivially thin and light that is. And that's what it looks like from the back. We've got our 5 megapixel rear camera there. It's pretty decent. It's not bad at all. And there's also a 5 megapixel front shooter on this. And to compare it to Surface Pro 4, whose introductory model with a Core M3 is also $899, here we have them. Now when they're in their respective keyboard cases, covers, whatever you want to call them, they look about the same thickness. The Surface Pro 4 has just a slightly larger footprint. Close enough, right? Now, the keyboard cover is included with your Samsung. It is not included with the Surface. However, the pen is included with the Surface Pro 4. The Samsung, it is compatible with a new TabPro pen they're coming out with. It does not yet exist in the United States. It looks like it just passed through the FCC March 14th, so just about a week ago or so. So I don't know when we'll see it. What we know about it is it has a precise tip. It's kind of a fat-bodied pen, and it does have palm rejection, and it uses Bluetooth, which is why it had to go through the FCC, one of the reasons, because it's using a wireless radio. We don't know much more about it, and if it should appear while we still have our review unit available, we'll cover that. But really unfortunate that I couldn't cover the pen. And for those of you who want to know about that, I have tried every pen with it. Now, Samsung owns 5% stake in Wacom, and they've been using Wacom's EMR pens, the S Pen, for example, for a couple of years. It doesn't work with the S Pen. It doesn't work with tablet PC-enabled pens. It does not work with the new Wacom AES pen. It does not work with N-Trig pens. It does not work with Synaptics pens. So it's none of those technologies. Why Samsung thought they had to come up with something, yet again, I don't know, but we'll find out. And here's the side view without the covers, so you can see the difference. And now this is 1/4 of an inch, this is 1/3 of an inch. So they're both pretty skinny, but the Samsung obviously is the thinner of the two, if that little bit makes a difference to you. So it's one of the first AMOLED Windows laptop / whatever you want to call it, tablet, all-in-one, 2-in-1 PCs. This is pretty interesting. This is a 12-inch Super AMOLED, 2160 by 1440 resolution, so plenty high resolution. And that's a 3:2 aspect ratio. If those numbers sound familiar, that's because that was what Surface Pro 3 had in terms of resolution. So for those of you who like that aspect ratio, a little bit less wide and oblong-y, you know, it's easier to use it in portrait mode, that fits the bill. Color gamut on this is excellent. 95% of Adobe RGB, 89% of NTSC, and of course full sRGB coverage. The white point is 7,000 degrees Kelvin, and that's not too bad. That's certainly better than sharp IGZO panels that had extremely high white points that were pretty hard to calibrate and make usable for professional photo and video editing work. 410 nits of brightness here. Because this is AMOLED and the backlight is off when it's showing blacks, we have perfect black levels, 0.0.0. There is nothing. It's the absence of all light, folks. It's pretty impressive. That makes for crazy high contrast ratios, just like with Galaxy phones. So our colorimeter measured it at 500,000 to 1, so you get the idea. Now, as I mentioned, AMOLED does have some challenges here, but first off, let's take a look at the Galaxy settings. Just like recent Galaxy smartphones, you have the same color options. Adaptive just tries to adapt to whatever you're showing to go for max color saturation and contrast. AMOLED Cinema is kind of like excessive HDR. I think it's a bit over the top. AMOLED Photo, that's what we have it on. That's pretty close to Adobe RGB, that wider color gamut that professionals use for print, particularly product. And Basic is sRGB, which is the ideal for anything you're developing for the web. See the dimming options here? They have this separately from the regular Windows power plans because AMOLED displays do have a tendency to burn in, so it wants to basically dim the screen as quickly as possible. And if we let it dim here in a minute or so, you'll notice that it doesn't stick to one dimness. It gets dimmer, then it gets less dim, then it gets more dim. So it's actually varying the backlight all the time until it switches into a Galaxy screensaver, which is black with a spinning Galaxy logo. So that's to avoid burn-in. The translucent taskbar down here is on the dark side. So far hasn't burned in. We're going to have to test this for several weeks to see if we start to see any display burn-in, especially with higher contrast desktop patterns. For example, the water here surrounding the ducks, we've got some stripes that just might start to show up if you're then looking at a light gray background. That's when you might notice it. All in all, if you're a consumer who is not, we got the dimming thing going on, who is not worrying about professional level color calibration, this is just a stunning and lovely display to look at. And it's not so crazy over the top that it looks that different from Surface Pro 4, which is 100% of sRGB and about 75 to 78% of Adobe RGB. If you are a professional, it is calibratable. You've got these options here as starting points. Again, AMOLED Photo would be your sRGB. If you go with Basic, that's for doing your web work. With our colorimeter, it brought down the greens, which are a bit excessive on this. In just about any of the configurations, it's less pronounced in the basic mode. But what it did is it warmed up the blacks and the grays so that our grayscale was a little bit off. It's challenging to get it perfectly calibrated, but it's not so far off that it really bothers me. I think saturation is going to be the bigger issue because this is going to look more saturated. Look at the signal orange duck feet right there than most any consumer printer can actually print. Now, here we have another product Samsung would love you to buy, of course. This is the Samsung Galaxy S7 that we just reviewed recently. And this is in the picture because instead of this sort of pointless things like Samsung Side Sync they came up with, they're now working on something called Samsung Flow. You can see the little live tile right there for Samsung Flow. Now, when we first got this, it said Samsung Lorem Ipsum, which is placeholder text. It got updated to say Samsung Flow. It's still not ready for prime time. In the least, it provides a way to use on your recent Galaxy phone with a fingerprint scanner, a remote fingerprint logon for your PC. So you can log into Windows in theory using the phone instead. Just rest your finger on there. You connect them via Bluetooth. Now, at the very best, it's going to be like Apple's continuity and handoff feature where you can actually share documents seamlessly back and forth. Say you're working on a Word document on your phone. God bless if you're doing that. That's not much fun on a small screen, but you might be doing that. And you can switch to open it up right on your PC pretty easily is the idea there. Likewise, if you're looking at a web page on the tablet and you want to have it on your phone because you're going to hit the door and go out, you can do that. That's the idea. It's not ready yet, so we can't show it to you yet either. Okay, so how does this function as a PC? Because obviously, like the Surface Pro 4, it could stand in for a regular laptop, and there are other Intel Core M products on the market, like the 2016 Dell XPS 12 as well. That one starts with a higher Intel Core M5 versus the M3 that is used in the introductory model of Surface Pro 4 and in this guy here. This has the Core M-6Y30, that's Skylake's 6th generation Core M, which sits above Intel Atom, well above Intel Atom, but below the Intel Core i3, i5, and of course the i7 CPUs in terms of performance, but it's not that bad. It has much lower initial or base clock speed, 900 megahertz. It's been a while since we've talked in megahertz, right? But it does have turbo boost to 1.5 gigahertz, and with the Core M, it spends a lot of time boosting. So take the 900 megahertz with a grain of salt. Think of it more as a fluid line between that and 1.5 gigahertz. That's still a lot lower than, say, a Core i5. But performance overall is fairly good. This has Intel HD 515 graphics, by the way, a little bit lower than the 520 used on your Core i3, i5, i7. 4 gigs of RAM. Obviously, this is a sealed design. You probably have to pull the display off to get to the internals like Surface Pro 4. Maybe the back could be pulled off. I don't know. This is certainly not user serviceable. I take everything apart. I would not begin to think about taking this apart. 4 gigs of RAM undoubtedly soldered onto the motherboard. It has 128 gig SSD. Performance on that is pretty good. Well, we'll show you the Crystal Diskmark score on that. And we hear that there'll be a 256 gig model as well. Qualcomm Atheros dual band Wi-Fi 802.11 AC with Bluetooth 4.1 and NFC also. You see the NFC logo here, and that's obviously the contact point right there. Qualcomm makes some of the best Wi-Fi out there. They do killer, though this is not a killer networking product. Still, this has really good performance. For those of you who haven't been too excited by the Marvel Wi-Fi and Surface products, understandably, they're just okay at best. This is very good. This is some of the best range and throughput we've seen ever on the tablet. Now, in terms of performance, as I said, this sits significantly above the Intel Atom. And it used to be, for a design to be this slim and this light, there was no way you could get anything more than an Atom in here. So this is pretty refreshing. Here's our PC Mark 8 Home Accelerated score of 2542. That's not so far below Intel Core i5s that we've reviewed recently in 2-in-1 products. So pretty decent showing there, and the thermal behavior, despite the thinness, is pretty good. Now this, it does perform a little bit under the Surface Pro 4 with the same Core M3 CPU, and I suspect just the thinness of this, there's more thermal consideration. They don't want to drive it as hard. So Geekbench 3, it scored 2221 for the single core and 4584 for the multi-core, which is pretty good. We see 5500 or so for a Core i5 usually, and Surface Pro 4 Core M did 4947. So you can see that there is a 400-point spread there between this and the entry-level Surface Pro 4, but something that experientially in use, I couldn't tell the difference. They work equally well. This is capable of doing Photoshop for casual stuff. 1080p video editing, there's going to be some lagging there with this. Certainly fine for Word, Excel, streaming Netflix, all of those sorts of things, everyday productivity work, editing databases. If you're doing coding, I wouldn't want to compile large programs on this. It's going to take you a while. But if you're writing short programs, then sure. And this is the SSD benchmark here. Decent numbers, nothing to write home about, but at this price point, we don't expect a fancy PCIe, NVMe SSD here. So acceptable scores for the 128 gig SSD, which, by the way, has around 89 gigs free at first boot. So that could be a little tight if you have a lot of programs, a lot of files. But again, if you're just using this for productivity, it's probably a sufficient amount of space. So how about battery life? Obviously, there's not room for a huge battery in here, and the Intel Core M hasn't been super duper so far in terms of battery savings, probably because it does spend so much time in boost. And then you have that whole AMOLED issue where whites do consume more power if you're showing predominantly bright white screens. Guess what? This actually does very well. Samsung claims 10 hours. We've routinely managed 8.5 hours on a charge. That's at 40% brightness, and given how bright this display is, 40% brightness is still quite bright, with Wi-Fi on and active, and that's doing productivity tasks, a couple of photo edits with some raw files in Photoshop, your usual Word, Excel, email, social networking, and streaming a 45-minute episode, or give or take 50-minute episode of House of Cards on Netflix. So it actually does have good battery life, so that's a consideration there if you're like Surface Pro 4, but that 6.5-hour battery life isn't just quite cutting it for you. The charger looks like a Galaxy Android tablet or a giant phone charger, doesn't it? And this is what you get right here. It is a detachable cord, USB-A to USB-C. A short cord, I do wish it was longer, but anyway, it's quite compact and very light, obviously, to carry around. So one consideration when trying to use this as a laptop replacement is that, like the 12-inch MacBook, There is a headphone jack and one USB-C 3.1 port, and that's it. So you're going to have to get used to dongles and adapters, and that USB-C port also functions as the charging port. So you're going to need splitters if you want to charge it or keep it powered up at the same time as using USB-C peripherals. Now Samsung's going to have a little dock adapter thingy of their own. It's not available in the US yet either. However, we did try several third-party products. Right here we have Dell's little USB-C adapter. This guy does VGA, HDMI, Ethernet, and has a USB 3.0 port. This works just fine with it. Obviously you can't charge it at the same time, but that does give you the versatility of having all of those ports, so you can actually use this as a laptop, in other words, for those of us who actually need to connect stuff to it. And here we have a Lumsing HDMI adapter. That also works. You can drive a 4K display. Well, one thing to consider is you also might want to use mini DisplayPort or DisplayPort, because it's hard to find HDMI 2.0 to drive a 4K display at 60 Hz refresh rate. So DisplayPort will do that for you, and that works too. So it is possible with these various USB-C adapters to get things going, and Samsung's adapter, we hope, will also break it out so you can do charging at the same time as using some peripherals. So how about speakers? Small, thin tablets don't generally have the best speakers. Here we have our Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge review, and take a listen. We're at 66% volume right now.
See, S7 Edge because it has curved sides. Both sides are curved, just like the S6 Edge.
That's not bad at all. It might not be iPad Pro quad speaker kind of fullness and richness, but for a tablet this thin and light, it's not bad at all. And obviously the screen is stunning to use to watch videos of any kind here. So that's the Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S. It's one of the slimmest, one of the lightest Windows 10 tablets on the market, and it has a full Intel Core M3 CPU, not Atom, which is pretty decent for performance for everyday productivity work. Now, it's not going to be like Surface Pro 4 with a Core i5 or i7, but for a lot of folks, this will have plenty enough to offer, and it's so crazy portable. The AMOLED display is beautiful, and Samsung did a good job with it too. The color accuracy is reasonably good. It's certainly stunning to look at with crazy infinite blacks at $899 with the included keyboard case folio thingy. It's a pretty competitive price. Now, we only wish the pen was available right now so we could talk about how that works, but since it's a brand new kind of technology, it's not on the market yet, we can't do that. If that pen becomes available before we have to return our review unit, we will do a video of that too. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech reviews like this.